They say the walls of Topkapi Palace have ears, whispering secrets to those who dare to listen. Legend has it that if you venture deep enough into its ancient corridors, you might just catch the faint echo of footsteps that never saw the light of day. The footsteps of princes who faded into mere shadows of their former selves. Some dismiss these tales as stories meant to spook tourists, but the palace's long-serving staff knows better. These whispers belong to the boys who lived and often died within the confines of the cage. Our story begins on a winter night in the Ottoman Empire, a time when the empire stood as one of the most formidable powers on earth. At the heart of this sprawling kingdom reigned the Sultan, absolute, unquestioned, and feared by all. Yet, despite wielding immense power over millions, he harbored one overriding fear: his own kin. This fear wasn't born overnight. It was a consequence of centuries marred by betrayal, rebellion, and the brutal fratricide committed in the ruthless pursuit of the throne. The Ottomans' family believed that only one man could rightfully rule, and every prince posed a potential threat to the reigning sultan. Thus, a chilling idea took root. An idea conceived to safeguard the empire, but one that would ultimately crush countless young lives. This idea would later be known by a name that still sends shivers down the spines of historians: the caves. The caves. The cage was not a prison in the conventional sense. Rather, it was a secluded suite of rooms nestled deep within the palace, concealed behind imposing doors and guarded around the clock. A prince confined within was not subjected to shackles or starvation. Instead, he lived amidst opulence, surrounded by silken cushions, golden plates, and plush carpets. Yet, one essential element was conspicuously absent: freedom. A prince in the cage was forbidden from stepping outside, from strolling through the gardens, from engaging with the outside world. He was denied any semblance of choice, not even the choice of when he would die. And all of this was decreed by their very own father, the Sultan. One sultan in particular is spoken of more than others. Some remember him as a wise ruler, while others brand him a monster. His name is less important than his actions. Upon ascending to power, he couldn't shake off the chaos that had plagued his own childhood. The screams, the soldiers, the night his brothers never woke again. He yearned to avert bloodshed. He craved peace. And so, he chose a path that history would remember all too vividly. He began locking away his sons. He would observe them in the courtyard as they frolicked in their youth, running, laughing, chasing one another beneath the olive trees. Their small feet left fleeting imprints in the dust. Their voices echoed with unadulterated joy. Yet, behind the Sultan's smile lurked a palpable tension, a tremor of unease. He saw not merely children. He saw future threats, potential conspiracies, and possible rebellions waiting to erupt. And so, one by one, as soon as they reached an age where they could comprehend orders, each prince was escorted into the heart of the palace and disappeared behind the impenetrable doors of the cage. The transition was invariably terrifying. The first night unfolded with a haunting similarity for each prince. A eunuch would guide the boy through hushed hallways, illuminated by flickering lanterns. The prince, understandably confused, would repeatedly ask where they were going, but the eunuch would remain stonily silent. The scent of dust and aged stone grew increasingly heavy as they advanced. Servants would avert their gazes as the prince passed, as if already mourning his fate. And then, the doors would swing open heavy, intricately carved, and Colden, the prince, would step into the rooms that would forever define the course of his life. At first glance, nothing appeared overtly threatening. The rooms were spacious and exquisitely furnished. The prince had access to food, books, music, and even tutors, but the pervasive silence was unsettling. The windows were secured with bars. The guards stationed at the door remained tight-lipped. And after a few days, the stark realization would dawn upon the prince. These rooms constituted the entirety of the world he was permitted to inhabit. Some princes succumbed to madness. Others grew withdrawn and emotionally empty. Some languished for years without ever knowing whether they would be released or meet their end. Princes in the cage were kept in the dark about their own destinies. Sometimes, a prince would be confined for 2, 3, or even 4 decades. Soudain, without any prior indication, a guard would throw open the door and announce that he was now the Sultan, and a man who had scarcely spoken to another soul for decades would be expected to govern an empire. Other princes would never see that door open again. The Sultan, who instituted this system, genuinely believed it was an act of mercy. Better to imprison than to execute, he reasoned. Better to preserve peace than to shed blood. But he never ventured to visit the cage. He never witnessed the profound transformation in his son's eyes as the years slipped by. He never felt the paralyzing fear that gripped their hearts. One story recounts that the Sultan once strolled past the cage late at night and overheard a gentle melody. Intrigued, he inquired of the guard as to the source of the music. The guard replied, "It is Prince Mehmed, my lord. He sings to remind himself that he is still alive." The Sultan departed without uttering a word, but later that night, he found himself unable to sleep. The haunting song echoing relentlessly in his lonely, fragile tune that seemed to fade into the surrounding darkness. Another tale speaks of a prince who refused to speak for so long that he ultimately lost his own voice. When he eventually became Sultan after enduring 40 years within the cage, he could barely string together coherent sentences. His hands trembled incessantly. The empire suffered during his reign, not because he was inherently cruel, but because the cage had transformed him into a living ghost. Historians continue to debate the necessity of the cage. Some argue that it effectively prevented civil war. Others contend that it was one of the most inhumane systems ever devised by a ruling family. But within the palace walls, among those who served closest to the throne, no one questioned its inherent darkness. They claimed that the princes walked like shadows because they had lost faith in the world outside. They asserted that the silence of the cage was more oppressive than any chain. And they whispered that the Sultan, over time, began to appear older than his years, as if the palace walls themselves bore the weight of every vanished son. Ultimately, the cage accomplished its intended purpose. It maintained stability within the empire. No rebellions erupted. No bros turned on each other in a bloody struggle for power. No blood was spilled in the name of ambition. But peace founded on fear is merely a different form of war. And today, when historians wander through the deserted palace, they say the air still feels different near the old locked rooms, as if the shadows of forgotten princes still linger there, whispering a simple truth. A gilded cage is still a cage, and even the most powerful sultan cannot escape the ghosts he creates. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows of history.